Talk.
Put it
Right.
in gear.
Okay, welcome to the May 19th regular meeting at 7:05 p.m. of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside Board of Directors. Roll call, please.
Director Alifano,
Here.
Chair Harvey,
Here.
Director Boyd,
Here.
Director Warren,
Present.
Director Lohman,
Here.
Director Alifano,
Here.
I'm sorry, Director Kowalczyk.
He'll be here in 10 minutes. We'll go ahead and go on with that.
Alan, you had to think about that? You said here twice, but I don't think that means double this time.
I get paid twice.
All right, so the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, public comment? Any public comment? Yes.
Tomorrow, this will be too late for people watching on TV, but tomorrow from 6 to 8, I think it's at the Yacht Club, there's yet another workshop or discussion or something on coastal erosion. And I may hand out copies of a memo that I found in the GSD files dated sometime in the early 60s, 40 years ago, talking about this.
Oh. You know, coming south, I got splashed. The surface beach, they got a splash came up. Pretty big waves came slopping over the edge. All right, any other public comment or items not on the agenda from the audience? Okay, now then, let's go ahead into any oral communication. Not, then we'll go ahead to the consent agenda.
Public comment.
A, approved minutes of April 28th, 2014 Sound Board meeting. B, receive and file managers' monthly reports for April 2014, including A, monthly flow report, B, financial statement, C, monthly NPDES report, D, collection system data, and then C, approved disbursements for May 2014.
I would like to hold for discussion the monthly flow report and the disbursements.
Okay, so that's B,
VA.
B, A, and C. Okay.
And if nobody has anything else to be held for discussion, I will move approval of 3A, BB, BC, and BD.
All right. Have any discussion? Do we have a second? We have a second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Those other items?
Just a quick one, not having been here last month, can I still vote for the approving the minutes?
Yeah, you're just representing that you believe it's an accurate representation of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Right, in that case, all those in favor of those other items?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, they pass. Right, let's go ahead on to monthly flow report.
All right, well, it's deja vu all over again. Half-moon base flow at 44%, really? Everybody here who believes that, raise their hand. One, yeah, okay. This is now at the point where it's significantly affecting Montera also. The flow shown here is 15% over Montera's very long-term average and 10% over their more recent average. I don't know what the problem is. We need to find out what the problem is. So bottom line is I will not be voting to approve this flow report, and I would urge the other member agency representatives affected to not approve this flow report.
Do we have any, those, could you, just for the sake of the record, Leonard, could you be specific as to which flows and how they, could you be more specific for us?
Yeah, I simply do not believe that Half Moon Bay's flow is 44% of the SAM inflow. Doesn't get any simpler than that. And, you know, the past attempts to blame it on I&I from rain, yeah, what rain? Okay, we had a couple rain spikes, but nowhere near enough to make a measurable difference. Now, one of the things that GSD's general manager, Chuck Duffy, was supposed to have brought up at the managers meeting, and I don't know whether he did or not, is the question of whether the whether flow storage in El Granada is leaking. Because if it is, all of that is going to get charged to Granada, which of course doesn't explain why Montera's flow is up.
Director Warren, if I may, we did go out and pop the lid out there, we took a look inside that, and it's dry. There is a very minor leak, but we're talking, it's wetness, it's not receiving a significant amount of water coming into that.
Okay, so the question is, why are we seeing the same pattern? We let the ants in there.
Well, we did find in a manhole just downstream from the tanks, quite a leaker, about the size of width of my thumb.
Can you elaborate on
We found a manhole with infiltration.
infiltration?
Yes,
Where-
it's
and
a
where's
stream
the-
about the size of my thumb.
Where's the infiltration coming from?
Just downstream from the new tanks up by Portola pump station. So.
But that would mean, infiltration.
Yes, so it's groundwater coming in through a hole, and it's in a SAM manhole. So that would feed into Portola potentially.
Well,
We don't have a quantity on that.
Do you have a kind of a rough guess of the quantity?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Before, the manhole across the street from me was raised by about this much. It was during heaviest rains under 6 inches of water, and I had, through our general manager, our engineer computed based on 6 inches of head through whatever size the hole was, what's the inflow rate, and it's much, much higher than you could possibly guess it is.
Right. So tomorrow, we're gonna go out, and we found this today, we're gonna go out and check the rest of the manholes on that gravity section that feeds into Portola. We did, about a year ago, fix 2 circular cracks, and, you know, they could let water in, but those are repaired, so we're gonna be looking specifically at the manholes and trying to find more of these, to be sure. So we did find some flow going into Portola, it does not belong to Granada.
Okay, and then the other end of this problem is that once you find and fix these things, we never get an adjustment. You know, we've already overpaid by like $150,000 for the past read issues, and I want an adjustment going back.
Okay,
on
so
this.
on this procedurally, if you want that adjustment, I suggest that you formally request it and have an action before the board so we can hear it, discuss it, and vote on it. I would remind you that Granada, in the interest, and I applaud this, in the interest of getting us back on track and continuing to work harmoniously, elected to not pursue that. I don't think that should be, you know, for all time forward, you should suffer injury. I'm with you on that. But I think on the other, I think you took an action much like with like the Burnham Strip property itself. You didn't come to Sam and say, hey, you know, for the project, we want to, you know, have that accounted for. In the same way that Montera didn't do that for the land and the property, you know, the facilities for the Walker tank. I mean, we're trying to set this pattern of there are times where we can do this without a strict accounting. It makes it more collegial and helps us get through some sticky wickets. For the going forward, I think it's totally legit. If you want to, after all this time, reconsider, you know, go back and reconsider an adjustment, I don't want to hear about it every month. If you really want to, you know, deal with it, let's deal with it as an item of board business.
All right, so can we get that as a future agenda item at an appropriate time?
But
Is that on the agenda today, isn't it?
Well, some of the agenda items later touch on this, but I think once the staff has finished their investigation of the problems we just heard about, then if you could put this issue on the agenda at that time as an additional agenda item after that report.
Director Warren, just for clarification, you're looking for something that is a broader discussion of flow balances within.
Of correcting GSD's charges based on after the fact discovery of
Flow meter inaccuracy.
well, that would be one, but then the other issue is, you know, like the infiltration that technical services supervisor just reported on, you know, that also, that's not a meter problem, and yet it still tilts the numbers against GSD.
So let me ask a question, Tony and Rob. So the flow has to be 100%. So say if that leak that you're talking about did was significant, would that cause a decrease in affluent base flow?
It would skew the percentages is what it would do.
Pardon me?
It would skew the percentages.
It would skew the
Yeah,
percentages.
'cause it's measured again here.
How soon do you think you might be able to give us an estimate of that leak? How much was it per month or per week or
I
day?
can't say for sure right now, but, you know, perhaps we can look at the rainfall and maybe get some, we don't know yet. We have to talk to some people who do this kind of thing.
So these flows could be skewed because of that particular leaks like that?
Yeah, potentially.
Okay.
So it increases Granada's flow, which decreases half-moon bay's percentage.
Right, I understand. So should we, maybe we shouldn't approve these, we see them, but we've been reported. If that might be the significant cause, then we should postpone this flow report.
Chair Harvey, one thing I'd like to point out is we're looking for pressure grout contractors right now. That's the folks that actually go in the manhole and they'll drill a hole in the barrel and they'll inject a grout that cures with water and they'll basically seal it.
Wasn't that done with the project before we accepted it?
Well, this is for the manhole.
So I mean, same process, same concept.
It would be a similar process to that. Where I'm going with that discussion is that contractor will probably have the best thumbnail estimate of what that kind of flow equals because they see them all the time. So they'll be able to say, well, this looks like, say, 15 gallons a minute or something like that. For us to get real drill down on this, we'd have to see what happens next month and see if we get a significant difference in the percentage or something,
Okay.
and then we can start working on the calculation. So
Okay.
we'll work on it, but at least in the short term, it'll probably be more of a guesstimate based on the questioning the experts, which will be the grouting contractors that do this kind of work.
Okay.
In my past experience, it only takes a few of things like this to throw things off, though. So, and you will see kind of them be reactive to rainfall just because of the additional head pressure you get when the ground gets saturated. So there may be some kind of tie in there.
But keep in mind that if it's leaking now, and we've had, for all practical purposes, no rain in the last, month and a half, 2 months. So if you see significant inflow or infiltration now, imagine how bad it was during the 2 storms we had this year.
All right, so
I've got a question. I got a question about the flow distribution report. Just looking at the graph.
Which page?
This is page 11 of 438. There's a pretty sharp discontinuity in the way that the flows are distributed between the 3 member agencies right about on the 11th. You can see the proportions changed a fair bit at that point, and it kind of stayed that way the rest of the month. Just looks odd. I wonder, given that we've stared at these flow reports previously and, wound up spending a couple of years trying to figure out the cause. I just want to, I'm not saying I know what it means, but I'm saying it looks interesting. And just point it out for, if that's any help at all while we troubleshoot. I look at that and I can't account for how on, the 10 days before that, Half Moon Bay's flows were much closer to Granada's, and then after that, you see the more typical separation between the two.
So I can add that we have all the meters calibrated just this last week, and no adjustments were necessary.
Hmm.
Wow, okay. So any other board members? Well, what's the pleasure of the board for the flow report? Situation.
You know, unless staff comes to us and says, oh, wow, we just found this flow meter was turned upside down and it was recording backwards, you know, whatever. My assumption is there's always gonna be some fluctuations. And I think that was one of the intentions one of the concepts we had of maybe when we got time to do the budget, rather than maybe having 1 year, maybe having more than just 1 year, to have 2 years to smooth out those inconsistencies. Because I'm not sure every time we see a little fluctuation, we want to have staff running out there and calibrating meters. Unless something gets really crazy, I think, I'm assuming this has been something that's traditionally you've all seen going on here.
What we don't have here, and I think we've had it before, but I'd like to put in front of you a request that we have another graph that shows the monthly proportion that each agency is reporting. Because for years, that would have been just kind of a straight line, just kind of wobbly, but pretty much the separation would be FMA, Granada, Montero.
You mean the percentage?
Just the percentages. So when you look at the percentage list here at the top of attachment A on page 11 of 438, those percentages and the raw numbers, the MGD numbers, if we had plotted those out month by month, then we don't need Leonard to be the one to point out this month's different, or we're trending in some direction over the past few months. Maybe we can go back and root cause what happened. And we have ground movement, all of a sudden we're getting inflow at some place. We want to find it because the flows are how we build.
So you're looking at some kind of a retroactive look back, like say a 5-year trending?
Yeah. Yeah,
I
we
think
had
at this
in
point
the,
we should go back 10 years because of so many problem years.
I think we have that document. I think Steve Leonard did something like that, or Tony, staff did something like that a while back. And I think it's, we can build off of that without having to redo all this stuff from scratch.
One thing we might consider moving forward in the future too is if the issue of calibration cycles, staff time, things like that come about, we might consider contracting out the calibration and the actual reading of the meters to a private contractor that reports that number to us and then certifies those numbers. And if we wanted to say do that contract with an individual for a year or two, then move it to another contractor and kind of cycle through to get sort of a cross check so that you have different entities basically fact checking each other. It might be something you consider. And at first glance, I don't think that it would be an enormous cost. If you gave you more confidence in the numbers, it might actually be worth it.
That's something, but all due respect, we went through that, didn't we, Tony? We had the meters checked with outside people.
We check them with outside people, but we do our calibration.
Yeah.
But I think what Rob is suggesting is that they take over all that, including the
Take over
generation.
that.
We contract out that entire
Contract
function,
out.
so that what they do is they end up reporting those numbers to the member agencies,
Oh.
and they certify them. And we could do that for, say, a 1 year, say, one fiscal period, or a period of several months, and we could compare that with our data going back over a certain period of time and see if we see any discrepancies that are large enough to cause some kind of question.
But through the chair, but we're still talking about that leak that you found.
Oh,
We have to have that resolved before we can do anything else.
Yes,
Excuse me, Rick, go ahead.
Thanks, Jim. So the question is this, doing the calibration and getting the flows, is it a burden on staff?
Machines,
Meaning-
by computer, it gathers the flows.
Because
We
I
just get a printout.
Because I'm just trying to understand, so if we contract it out to say, okay, now it's not us saying what it is, it's a kind of a third party certifying
It's
it?
sort of like a third-party check, and we can do it for just 1 year, and just see how it comes out in the overall scheme of things, to see if we see anything really radically different. If we don't, then it would just be an independent outside validation that the methodology that the staff is using to calibrate and check these things is accurate. So it eliminates one of the potential variables, and then we can start going down the list of, okay, well, we may have inflow, we may have other issues with this, with systems that may be SAM related or individual agency related or storm related. It just takes one of the variables and reduces the significance of it in the overall calculation.
So what are the consequences of not approving this flow today? So why don't we?
We turn everything off.
Why don't we postpone?
Really not sure.
I would suggest to the board that we postpone this flow report until the next month, when Tony has a chance to report on the leaks that he's found at GSD. Can we just hold off on this then? Would the board?
Yeah.
Before we make any other
I
decisions.
like that. Tony, if there's a chance to measure the flow through that thing,
Oh, absolutely.
that'd be helpful.
We'd really like to know ourselves.
Bucket test.
Bucket.
One other thing, at this point, I'm less sure that it's a metering problem rather than some bigger issue that we don't know about yet. And so, you may need to have an engineer look at the whole system and, what I think Rick is probably gonna get to on one of the other agenda items is we need to have direct metering of GSD's flow. This has just gone on way too long with these problems.
Well, we'll get to it, it'll be a good discussion.
Okay, so we'll take one step at a time, and we'll wait till we get that report from Tony.
Well, in the meantime, why don't we ask Jeff just to maybe get some rough numbers for an outside agency to do that for a year?
Okay.
And then when they bring that back, we can see if it makes some sense to do it, if it's not crazy expensive.
Okay.
But it would be nice to kind of put this issue to bed once and for all.
Is there agreement that this will also include an expert, maybe a different expert, but somebody to look at the whole system and see if
Didn't we already approve that concept as part of the budget? The hydraulics and
Well,
all of that. There were 2 projects we approved.
but that's not about the metering, that's about the hydraulic capacity of the system. That's just updating the hydraulic capacity work that was done previously. So that's a different item, it's a different matter, it's how much the system can handle
The pressure.
versus how we measure it.
I kind of had the feeling that those 2 surveys would also help us tell if our system flows were correct. Maybe Vivian can maybe respond to that. I could have sworn I heard that when we approved those items.
Is it Vivian?
Yeah, so when you do a flow study, you do look at I&I and you look at it in great detail, basin by basin. So that study would provide the information I think that you're looking for in terms of anomalies in I&I and where you might want to look further or meter further to get additional information. They do go hand in hand.
And what was the status of that? We didn't approve, we didn't approve that?
We approved it.
Oh, we approved it, okay.
Yeah.
It's not done yet?
All right, so let's go ahead and,
Moving on.
let's go ahead and move on to
disbursements.
disbursements. 3C.
One of my all-time favorite activities is reading through lists of numbers, but the IEDA payment is double their normal monthly payment. Can somebody explain that?
What page am I on?
Well, I don't know that I have usable page numbers here, but it's in alphabetical order on disbursements, IEDA. Their normal monthly payment is $875, and this is double that, $1,750.
It's a billing for 2 months.
But I looked at the previous 2 packets, and there's the $875 in each of the previous 2.
It's for April and May, but it's not listed here.
But in the April packet, there was $875, and in the March packet, there was $875.
February and March, we did not receive an invoice from them for April. So this is the April and May payment together.
So the April check
Somebody
was for
has it on
March.
their desk. So it's for 2
Oh, I
months.
just put May, sorry.
Okay,
So this is for 2 months, and I can get the,
Okay.
invoices if you like.
Okay,
All right.
Okay, so do we have a motion for approval of consent agenda item 3C?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll go on to item number 4, old business. A, receive update from SAM Ad Hoc Code of Conduct Committee. That's a mouthful.
I have to say, Rick, the one that you
Unfortunately-
sent me doesn't seem to have anything to do with the one I sent you.
And 100% of it is included. If I may give the update, and you can chime in. I sent I don't know if staff had time to print the copy I emailed at like 4 o'clock? No? Okay. Well, I can provide it again. So Leonard and I worked through the Code of Responsibilities. Now I'm going to pull it up electronically, and then we can provide it to the board to review. Basically, it is identical. You sort of need it. I emailed that to you around 4 o'clock.
To me?
Yeah.
Oh, all right, I'll go print it up.
Just put out if you got these things.
Okay.
So essentially, we combined two things. Leonard provided some input, which were some like 6 or 8 questions that he wanted included, but we were starting off the Code of Responsible Practices that was what we use in Half Moon Bay, and we're adapting it for SAM, which was not questions, so it turned the questions into statements, and they were all included in there.
It was a certain piece taken out of CCWD's really long one. So it was just a single section where they had it as questions in terms of, before you approve an expenditure, ask yourself all these things, you know, like what would your next door neighbor think, and what would you think if you saw this in the newspaper? And so Rick pointed out to me that to make it fit into the rest of it, it needs to be in terms of directives, not questions. And so I sent that to him, and he was supposed to turn it into the right format.
Right, and I guess what I'd like to do is give it to everybody to review, and just come back next time with any edits, which is different than comments. Because if you have something you want to change, you don't like, let's bring me a suggestion and make it grammatically correct.
Just on that one real quickly, that sounds like material straight out of the Attorney General's conflict of interest training materials and the testing materials. If there's, well, that one specifically is in that material, I just went through it. I don't know if that's, maybe it's good to have it all in one place, but it just occurs to me if there's stuff that's redundant with other things that we ordinarily come across, under,
You know,
I haven't seen the whole rest of it, so I don't know what it looks like in context, but.
So, and so it doesn't, it sort of is a couple things. I think it makes, it sends a signal to the community that we are all accepting these responsibilities, our code of conduct, how we treat each other and how we treat use of public resources. But it doesn't circumvent any, it's in addition to any other rules,
Right.
regulations, and laws. But it's something that I would hope that once we all agree to it, we would sign, and sign annually saying we agree to these terms.
well, in particular, it always annoys me when agencies include big sections out of state law in their own policies, and so the one that we're proposing just has some references.
How long is it right now?
2 pages.
Oh, never mind, never mind.
Yeah, and I want it to be 1 page, but it's a page and a half.
Yeah, I withdraw any concern.
So-
So I'm just now mentioning for the public's benefit, but there is conflict of interest training, ethics training for all elected officials and public officials, and that kind of material is covered. So, good.
So you're gonna send us an attachment so we can make our changes?
So
Send it to you?
I've given this to Leonard and to the general manager, so I guess Rob to distribute this electronically to the directors as well.
Okay.
That would be great.
And
And
we respond to you, Rick?
yes, respond to me.
Okay.
And the idea is, I mean, you can read it. It reads a little bit like motherhood and apple pie, but I think it sends the right message to the community.
Okay.
And Leonard, all those points are in here as statements. They're in there under, they fall under two areas, integrity and proper use of public resources.
There's two sections labeled proper use of public resources.
Well, that would be an error of the person who put this together, because he was looking for another category, and that's a mistake.
So I think you need to
We'll probably edit that one.
rearrange the bullet items so they're
More
all on
proper.
the same heading.
Even
So-
more. Even more proper use.
So, you know, instead of having all the language from the, you know, Government Code, the Brown Act, you see there's basically one sentence here that just says, yeah, we expect you to abide by all these things.
Okay, all right, thank you, Rick and Leonard. Go on to 4B, receive update from Recycling Water Committee.
Well, I sent an email out trying to set up a date for the three of us to
Ah.
get together. And,
The Responsible Practices Committee got together.
Over the phone.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We send a lot of emails back and forth.
I'm sorry.
okay,
Yeah, so what was the status? We
Um,
got a date yet?
I think Rick and I had agreed on a date, I was waiting to hear back from Scott. We'll probably have to push that off till next week, so let's see if the three of us can get a date. We can get our kind of a timeline put together, and then we can come back with our plan.
So it's just the SAM committee, you're not yet meeting with the CCWD?
No.
Well, that's what we're gonna talk about.
I will mention that the topic that we were discussing, I did a little bit of research, so I have something to bring to the table as soon as I reply back. And we can,
Now, is this, are we considering this a standing committee?
no, this is an ad hoc.
Okay. So,
It should have an end.
so, yeah, for it to be an ad hoc committee, one of the requirements is it has to have a defined deliverable, so the deliverable is.
It doesn't have to be defined.
Oh, yes, it does. To be an ad hoc committee, it has to have a deliverable such that when that's delivered, the committee is ended.
The Latin phrase is ad hoc, which means towards this goal, you know.
See, he's had
Oh,
medical
Saint
training.
Ignatius, look at it, it's right there in the shirt. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't have any problem, we can put together an intent of what the goals are for the committee. That shouldn't be that hard.
It's not gonna be as crisp as you might wish, as you might imagine. The whole idea here is to see if we can get this thing moving again. So at what point, you know,
I raise the issue
What-
because if you don't make sure it's an ad hoc committee, then the meetings have to be open and noticed
I
public
understand
meetings.
Okay, anyway, so you guys will.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry for
right
my
now,
outburst.
that's not actually a problem since we're not meeting.
Under a little pressure.
All right, so we're gonna go on to, item 4C, receive update on cost allocation agreement between City of Half Moon Bay and Granada Sanitary District for wastewater flow calculation.
Chair Herbie, if I can introduce this,
Thank you.
the work on this just briefly. At the last board meeting, there was some discussion about the calculations of flows that led staff to look into this, how this came about, as much educational for me as anything else. And what I attached what we found, which was an agreement between Granada and the City of Half Moon Bay that dates back to September 19th of 2000. And if I could get you to turn to the second page of the agreement, that actually is a signature page. It says down in, if you look at bullet point 3.2, it has the methodology for adjustment. And what it looks like is it requests that the district engineer at GSD should produce the calculations for a revised Appendix A and for review by the city engineer at Half Moon Bay. And so what I was looking at is that would probably be an appropriate starting point for further work if you wanted to look at amending that calculation.
Now, at the time that was done, GSD didn't have a general manager. We now have a general manager who knows how to use Excel. And so he sent, I guess, the two of us, you get the spreadsheet?
In the email like that we were just talking about earlier.
Not that I understand why his spreadsheet's as complicated as it is, because I really think that this is very, very simple. And I'm pretty sure that what I said at the last SAM board meeting is that somebody should call Half Moon Bay's Public Works staff and ask what is the average residential flow in Half Moon Bay for single-family residences? And they know the answer off the top of their heads, they won't even have to go look it up. And then we know the number of houses in Frenchman's Creek, and so we multiply the number that Public Works supplies by the number of houses in Frenchman's Creek, and that should be the adjustment factor.
This agreement, this is between Granada and Half Moon Bay?
14 years ago.
Well, there's the Blair, you're talking about the Blair King signed agreement?
Right.
Well, I mean, if that's what it is, this wouldn't really be something that we should be discussing here, should it?
Well, it's part of this overall issue. This was before, all the problems started by, 10 years
I
on.
think this is more about how did we get here.
Sam had to approve the connection because previously, before this action, the flow from Frenchman's Creek came out of Frenchman's Creek, crossed the highway, went up, went up the west side of the highway through the horse ranch areas, all the way up to Portola. So it was pumped. Was that pumped? No, that can't be pumped.
With San Pablo, I believe.
It went through Naples Beach Pump Station. Okay, so it was gravity flow out of here up to our Naples Beach Pump Station on San Pablo, and then it was pumped the rest of the 3 miles up to Portola Pump Station, where it was then pumped 3 miles back down to Sam. And I said, that's kind of dumb. And we still had contractor mobilized, and we just did a change order and had them, and of course, Sam had to approve this change because what they did is they just dropped the 20-foot pipe from the main coming out of Frenchman's Creek straight down into the IPS to eliminate a 6-mile round trip.
Wow.
That cost GSD $14,000. So, but because of that, the flow out of Frenchman's Creek is no longer metered through the Portola meter.
I see.
And so, because it goes into the IPS after the Portola meter, it would appear as Half Moon Bay flow, so this adjustment subtracts that presumed amount from Half Moon Bay's flow and adds it to the presumed amount for GSD's flow. But I think it's too high, and the actual flow calculations I don't think were ever presented to any of the boards. Only the agreement was.
So what you're looking for is?
A revisit of the calculations to see if they still make sense given modern day water savings.
So who do you want to approach? You're one of the parties. Do you want to
I'm trying to find
contact
Chuck's
Half Moon
email.
Bay?
Do you have Chuck's email handy? The one thing that I don't think he showed was how his number compares with the current number. Did he show that or not?
No, he's talking about the cost of all this metering, which we'll bring up as soon as you're done.
Yeah, Chuck is really against spending money on a meter on a really low flow place. He says it's going to be very difficult to have an accurate meter there, and the cost of installing it is I think roughly the same as the dollar amount that we're talking about on the flows.
What's the number?
I think he said $18,000 to install it. Do you know that?
It was just the installation costs, and he said
Oh, there we are.
that the metering cost would be $15,000 to $20,000 per year. But I don't know that was-
Let me throw this out, if we go out to an outside firm, could they not do some temporary metering, bring in their own meter and for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, monitor that flow? So instead of spending 20,000 whatever, maybe allow this outside firm to monitor that flow for a while.
Yeah, come to think of it, we might have done that, but wow, how long ago was that?
When we looked at it, we would have to install another manhole.
Yeah, it's a whole
It's
other
about $30,000.
installation.
So we never did the temporary
It's because there's a turn that the flow goes through, and you have to have some length after the turn to do it. And there was no good place to, you have to put multiple meters in to add them all together.
Yeah, so basically the bottom line is there were a bunch of technical reasons why it wasn't practical.
Okay, so why don't you approach CCWD and ask them, or Half Moon Bay, ask them for that calculation, ask them for that calculation and report back to the board.
For various reasons, I think it'd be better if Sam's staff
Okay.
asked for that.
Should it be
number.
GSD staff? Talk to F.
It would make sense to have Chuck, someone driving the spreadsheet.
All right.
It's the
Okay.
it's agreement between GSD.
Yeah,
and
that makes
they-
sense.
I mean, I'm not opposed to our staff doing it, but frankly,
All right.
Granada's the one that's kind of, energized by this, so if you really want to drive
Own
this
that half
into-
and then talk to our staff and then bring it back.
Okay.
Have your staff talk to our staff?
I would note that the daily flow per GSD single-family residence is listed in this document as 211 gallons per day.
But realize
I-
with 700 private
uh,
wells, we probably have a lot of people that don't care about
Leonard.
water usage.
Excuse me.
Scott, finish it, please.
That just because I stopped to draw breath doesn't mean I'm inviting further comment just yet. Just give me a second. 211 is a fairly high daily GPD in this day and age here on the coast
You're
side. So
on this,
He saw it on his computer.
this would be on page 61 of 438.
I don't actually have that open at this.
It's an interesting set of tables here.
What was the page number?
61. And it shows 182 residential connections, and the daily flow per GSD single-family residence is 211 gallons per day.
Scott, I'm sorry, I'm looking for that, I'm on that page.
It's about the middle of the page in the wider table, the first wider table. The second wider table.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah. If that is, those are wastewater flows. So that would seem to me to be even higher, because not all of your potable water winds up as wastewater. Some goes to outdoor use. And one thing I would point out, and I think some of the other tables here obviously contemplate it, that number changes over the seasons and depending on rainfall and outdoor use and such. And just like when we do our billing, we do it against wet weather months, because they were pretty sure that most of the water out of the tap winds up going down the drain. Whereas during the warmer months, obviously there's outdoor usage. So that just looks like a number that could do some updating.
And since now I'm trying to remember where I saw it. I think it was in Chuck's spreadsheet. It looked like a quite significant fraction of GSD's total flow was from Frenchman's Creek. I'd expect it to be 1/5 of the residential flow, and I think it showed up as 1/10, which kind of makes sense because we have some big non-residential flows. So if the Frenchman's Creek number is off by a factor of 2 per what Scott was getting at, that's still a couple of percent. That right there may very well explain most of the discrepancy in the bigger monthly flow percentage issue.
Not the month-to-month trending, but
Rick?
The point of why I brought this up, this is an interesting discussion, but my intent is not to spend 6 months improving the calculation for Frenchman's Creek and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on pumps and testing and re-verifying everything to find the perfect metering system. My intent in all of this is to move to the simple distribution of the cost that's just fixed, so we can just forget about this whole thing and quit talking about it every month. If we have some problems, we can do the investigations, we can find problems, we can find infiltration, we can fix it and do all those things we should be doing. But I'm not in favor of spending staff time and hundreds of thousands of dollars to change something 2% on a scale that for some reason next year is going to go off in a different direction. I'm still pressing for, let's just fix the percents and look at it again in 5 years or something, but this messes everybody's budgets. If it swings the other way, another agency might have to explain why their budget's up $150,000 this year to somebody. What are you idiots doing over there? Why are you charging us more? like we had to do. So these huge fluctuations back and forth essentially destroy the budgeting process. I mean, there's no way we just take the numbers and whatever number pops up that year, that's our budget, and then we have to shift everything else around to make that number look reasonable, because, you know, if we're talking shifts of, you know, $150,000, $200,000 a year, that's not budgeting anymore. You can't budget that kind of stuff. So my intent, again, is to press for a vote at some point on just going to a simple distribution by the factors, and we just, to me, there's this huge amount of savings in staff time, and all of our staff time, our meeting, wasting time, talking about this every month. Let's just solve the problem
All right.
and make it go away.
We discussed this last time, and there was some discussion about the fact that that Jim and Rob, are we legally allowed in this district to do that? Is there, I thought there were some legal issues about doing a percentage as opposed to measuring actual flows. Wasn't there some discussion about that? We had this discussion last meeting.
I think the only legal concern was if Leonard at one time raised changing the way you spread admin costs, which would probably mean looking back through the JPA, but if you're just adjusting, I think all you're talking about here is just coming up with a flow formula. And you're still basing your own M on flows.
Okay.
How do you come up with those flows? So that's not, I don't see a legal issue.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Hold on. Did you want to respond to that? There was no problem with that. Okay.
I was just, I was working up to it.
Okay. Rick.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so I thought our discussion was about, was it about the State Water Resources Control
Yes.
Board and the trend away from using static rates against variable costs?
Right.
And that's
That's what it was.
atypical and perhaps not allowed. I don't know if it's not allowed, but I know it's atypical from what I heard last
It
time.
was the issue of the, because your compatriot was here at the last meeting, in fact, it was on, for you, wasn't it?
John Mullen.
And his comment was, it's sort of the policy over at the regional board is contrary to the.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on a minute. Scott.
I'm all for simplifying things where we can. On this one, I'm less convinced that we can do it rightly. For example, in my time on this board, we went from having a car wash that did all of its own on-site recycling and didn't send its wastewater to SAM, and then one year just decided, no, we're gonna send it to the plant. And so now I think it was like 20,000 gallons a day or something at the time was what we anticipated coming in. 3 more car washes and even 1 more car wash, and we're gonna be talking about, well, the city would be obviously sending quite a bit more to the plant. So how often do we wanna be revising those numbers, and how would we know when it was time? I think that could become just as complicated as, I don't know, but I mean, I put that out there as kind of cautionary, because we have seen these usages change. I would ask, I know in Montero, we know to a certainty what's happening with our water usage and our flows, because Montero handles both ends of that. And we know that we've been becoming the most water conservationist community perhaps in the entire state. Our daily water usage per person is probably the lowest in the state of any actual organized municipal area. What's happened with water usage in the GSD over this course of time? I don't actually know. Do you guys know?
no, because we're kind of behind the times with fixed charge for residential.
So
And it's gonna be really difficult to deal with because of the 700 wells in the county not enforcing their ordinance requiring meters on the wells.
So we've got some of the same well issue that you do, but I don't see it as an intractable problem. And to the question about the monthly flow numbers, if you don't know the monthly water consumed numbers, it could be as simple as people in Granada are, I don't know, could it be as simple as the people in Granada aren't conserving as much as your neighbors
I suspect yes.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how Half Moon Bay, and I know Montera, we've been out there agitating, you know, encouraging our users to be really conservative because our rainfall's been obviously much lower than normal. We've been getting out, actively talking to the community about this. So I think we've got a good sense in Montera and Moss Beach what's happening, but I don't know similarly, I don't have that kind of awareness or numbers to back it up for Granada. So this is the kind of question that, say we went to a fixed ratio, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, I think we would have a legitimate reason with car washes and conservation and whatever, we'd take on a new task of figuring out how to set that allocation, and we'd be trying to decide when the right time to do it is, what triggers it, or is it, you know, regular, periodic, or these are challenges to this if we were to pursue this.
All right, so, you know, so we're kind of getting off the agenda. The agenda item was the agreement between City of Half Moon Bay and Granada, and we've sort of one or Chuck, you're going to handle this. If we want to talk about this further, we might make this another agenda item. Again, I know this is a second meeting in a row.
I thought this agenda item contemplated this kind of discussion.
Well, I mean, I thought that's what we, I thought this was my agenda item, that's why I was saying this,
Okay.
that's why I was.
Well, okay, but then I apologize. So,
Right, and that's why I was talking about it. I don't see a hard reason to stop on this, but I do want to lay out, okay, if we proceed, we're going to have to contend with these issues.
okay. Rick?
I mean, I'd be a lot more flexible on this if it was the kind of thing where, oh, we find an error, oh, it's been going on for 18 months.
Yeah.
That's cost you guys $150,000. Okay, that was unfair. Boom, we redistributed. If that were the case, and this is another little bump coming up, and we found the solution and redistributed it, again, I wouldn't be so, you know, manic about doing this, but the hits always come our way, and we always pay for them, and then we find a solution, and then we never get reimbursed.
Okay.
And that's just, I'm sorry, but that's just not the way things should work. So we're gonna continue this policy of, and we have all these formulas and strange things that can happen, and if it's always bumping us, I don't think Granada water usage went up 5% last month, because everybody started watering their lawns all of a sudden. I mean, this is a bump, and historically, we wouldn't get reimbursed for this, but that's why I keep pressing for something that, I'm tired of this, I'm sure our citizens are tired of, you know, paying for all the meter mistakes around here, so.
Hey, Rick?
And I don't wanna spend another $100,000 to play around with meters.
I agree.
So, I guess I'll ask Granada to, when you approach the city, I'll share my perspective, maybe take that with you when you approach the city about how to address this. I think I find it very difficult. The hurdle to go to a flat rate for a variable cost is something I will have a very difficult time to come to grips with. If there's another approach, so a way to remedy the situation should there be some error. You know, Alan and I'll speak for you and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we're totally fine paying our fair share, whatever our fair share is, right? We're generally comfortable there. And I think we get into trouble when we say, do things retroactively to do some sort of repayment unless we can sort of put our finger on exactly, oh, it's because of this specific reason. You know, oh, there was a leak here, but I don't know where else there were leaks, and maybe, you know, it becomes a bit of a subjective sort of an argument, right? Well, we found a leak, but are there others, or, you know, what's the totality of the situation, what are the facts? I think that makes it very difficult to do that sort of retroactive reimbursement. I'll share this again. I think one potential that could be helpful is going to use a moving average. We had talked about doing that before, and maybe the transition to that was going to cost Granada. So maybe there's a different way to transition to using a moving average for calculating flows, so that a peak in a valley, a peak doesn't hurt and a valley doesn't give you benefit, and it all sort of balances out over time. Maybe we were going to jump in too fast before, but I would find that to be a more logical approach that I would be open to. I just want to share that.
Okay, so thank you. Well, Leonard?
I think there's only two reasonable ways to go forward with this. One is we either go to the fixed percent allocations that Rick is pushing, or we have to directly meter Granada. Because anything else, we're just gonna keep having this argument over and over and over again. So either we directly meter Granada or we go to fixed allocations. And so we need an agenda item very specifically to discuss those two options.
Is it possible, Tony, to put a meter between Granada and Half Moon Bay on the intertie? A distinct meter?
Not the intertie now.
Not on the intertie?
They'd have to meter a few pipes going into Portola.
I think Granada feeds into Portola in 2 or 3
Frenchman's Creek?
lanes.
And then there's Princeton, which we don't use.
Oh, so Princeton pump station doesn't go through Portola? I thought it did.
It does.
Yeah, so basically, we would need to meter the 3 GSD inputs to the Portola pump station. I
And
think.
that includes Frenchman's Creek.
That's not an input, that one's really difficult, as we already discussed.
But then we can't, it's not as simple to
But
directly meter.
Well, but this will get most of the problem. And
I'd look at it, and I mean, just let me mention, Rick, I know you don't wanna spend a whole lot of money, I don't see why it would all fall on Granada. This is a SAM problem.
Oh, I mean, I didn't say
Yeah.
it'd be a Granada.
Oh, okay, well,
I said, why would we
I
as
just
a
want you to
group
know,
wanna spend hundreds of
I
thousands
see
of
it as a
dollars?
SAM problem, so
Yeah.
if we have to put in another manhole, if we have to put in another meter, if we have to do something about that bend, okay. Say, you know, this is something that affects us all. I think it's pretty clear that where it goes to the billing, especially where the billing is done with a calculation, that where if one benefits, the other one loses. I mean, it's pretty much one for one, so I think we're all in this together. So I would look at that and go, that seems to me to be a shared cost, so it shouldn't hit you guys
Yeah, that's fine.
quite as hard as you might be imagining. I just wanted to say that out loud.
So can we, how about, can I suggest we give direction to staff to look into metering? What would it take,
right, direct metering all GSDs.
including Frenchman's Creek? We could, maybe you could make that, in a couple of months, give us a report on that. Would that be a reasonable request?
Now, Naples Beach, was our rebuild of that, did that include a meter, I think?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you have any thoughts on how that's working out, that meter?
We just had it calibrated and it works great. It's a new meter, no adjustments were needed.
Is the flow out of there high enough that you have faith in the,
I haven't gone in and calculated out what I think it should be, but I don't see any reason why, given a full pipe and everything, that it should be a problem. These meters are pretty.
well, that's true, it's a force main. Yeah, see, force mains are easier to meter.
Okay, Rick Walsh.
Thank you for clarifying the Rick. That was
Oh, sure, no problem.
So previously, there was a schematic, I think it was a PowerPoint, but it may have been others, that showed basically SAM and where all the meters were and how flows were calculated all in one sheet. I don't know if that's still around, but it probably needs to be updated. I would think it would be helpful if we're gonna have this discussion, if we also have that as one of the resources.
Okay, yeah, maybe Rob, you could find that.
We'll take a look.
That was, wasn't that, I'm not sure who gave that to us.
Probably
Alan?
SRT.
Okay, okay, so then we've given direction?
Yeah.
So we all agreed that we're gonna find out what it would take, or what's involved in metering for Granada. All right, so if no other objections, we'll go on to the next item of business, which is 5. This is new business. A, adopt resolution 2014 SAM Sewer System Management Plan, SSMP, and SAM Overflow or Emergency Action Plan, OEAP, update, discussion and possible action.
directors, as a lead into this, interim general manager, housing manager, her engineering firm, took on this task of doing a mandatory periodic update of our SSMP, which she's completed. And it turned out to be a very professional document, and I wanted to acknowledge that and use that as a kind of an introduction for any questions to be directed at this house as far as the intricacies of that.
All right, Debbie, did you want to introduce this?
Oh, sure. So this document is a regional board and state water resource control board requirement. The original requirement was established in 2005 for the region and 2006 for the state. There was a 5-year update required, but during that, right around the 5-year period, the state also changed its waste discharge requirements, and they changed the monitoring and reporting requirements. And so as a result, they have not been demanding proof of update from agencies, but at this time, they are requiring every agency of this size to file a self-audit. And so we thought that it would be prudent to update the SSMP in time for the self-audit, so the self-audit could show that the new state requirements have been incorporated. So this document that you see follows the State Water Resource Control Board outline exactly. It lists the requirements of the state and the regional mandates, and then addresses every section of the mandate in the order presented in the document, and it's a very common format that's used throughout California.
Do we have the document in front of us?
It's not in the paper copy of the packet.
It's right, Vivian, it's right behind you in a binder, and he can look at that one.
Okay. Or do I pass that one around too?
Sure, okay, hold on a second.
So there's 2 copies.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
The overflow emergency response plan that you mentioned is also a mandatory part of this document. It's required as part of element 6, and it's also required to be a standalone document, which is why it's, the entire OERP is in its own appendix, appendix E.
All right. Rob, anything to add?
If the board so chooses to adopt this, it needs to be adopted by a vote and a resolution, which is attached behind the staff report.
Okay, well, Leonard?
Is it possible, and the answer to this very well be no, maybe no, can you summarize the differences between this one and the last one we approved? Or is that too extensive because of the change in formatting?
Would you like me to?
Sure.
So the document that has been on file very minimally met the requirements of the sewer system management plan. In fact, I would say in some elements it did not meet the sewer system management plan requirements. If the regional board had, that's not uncommon. So when the first requirement came around, most agencies took a minimalist approach, not knowing what the document would be used for. And really did try to do only answer the questions that were asked and only directly asked. The regional board has reviewed many of these documents through their inspections and many of the audits, and they have been very, very clear with agencies that they want the sewer system management plan to be an operating manual for the agency. When they do inspect the agency, they go through the SSMP and they will ask questions of individual staff members as to portions of the SSMP. They want to make sure that everyone's read it and they use it. And if you don't read and use the SSMP, then that does come out as a negative comment in your inspection. So they're looking for this to be more than just a regulatory requirement that is met and put on the shelf. They want it to be an actual operating and maintenance manual.
And what are the consequences of adopting this, if we adopted this today, what would be the consequences of this? Would we have to initiate projects, take action at this point?
No, this is an operating and maintenance manual, and it basically summarizes what you do. So, and where the agency does not have has not met certain requirements, it also describes that you're taking steps to get there.
Okay, so what we're doing now takes care of this document at this
Correct,
point.
what that's doing is memorializing that this work has been done in accordance with
Okay.
the state requirements that came out back in September of last year. The areas that Vivian's called out, that are things that Sam needs to address to build that into a better operating document we can start working on. A lot of what that does is it memorializes some of our emergency response plans, our chains of command, who calls who when, and it goes into great detail like that, so that I think the concept at the end of the day is basically a flow chart model that staff can go to and go, okay, I'm having X, who do I call, in what order, and why?
Okay, but Rob, I'm asking our current budget discussion direction is handling this document at this point.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Rick Walchek?
So so in adopting this, are we changing any procedures that staff are following, or we're just formalizing what staff is already doing?
I believe we're formalizing what's existing, and then if there are what they call, I don't know whether deficiencies is really the right word, but if there's things that we aren't currently doing, then those are to be addressed as part of the document.
Got it.
They're called out within the document as, here's some things that you need to address, and then I believe there's an appendix at the back, where as we make these changes, we can notate the changes made with the date and things like that, and that's an acceptable practice with modifying the document over time.
That's correct. And this only applies to SAM's pipes, it does not apply to the member agencies. Each member agency needs to have its own SSMP.
Now, previously,
What did we do?
It's Leonard
You will
Warren?
have- you-
previously, the member agencies somehow, and I don't think I understood this at the time, so I certainly don't now, but the member agencies piggybacked on SAM's SSMP, and I understand from something in here that we can't do that anymore.
That's right, each member agency has its own waste discharge ID and its own sewer system, and is required to have its own SSMP and legally responsible official.
One question which might be more for council than management, I assume this is a public record, but the page that's missing from here can't be a public record. The page that's missing from here includes confidential internal phone numbers for organizations like PG&E. So how is that handled? There's non-public phone numbers on the missing page. So how do we make sure that that's...
Typically, when the SSMP is posted online, personal phone numbers are blacked out in the public version. They have to be, the manner in which staff are contacted has to be in here, whether it's a district cell phone or personal phone, it depends on the process. But typically, I've seen the SSMPs that are posted online, which is also a requirement, have those numbers blacked out.
But it's not only personal phone numbers, but like PG&E has a phone number there which is not a public phone number, but it's specifically for entities like SAM to call when we have a urgent emergency and need immediate attention from them, and so we don't have to go through their dispatch that is trained to say, there's no reported outage in your area.
I don't recall a PG&E number.
Can we safely black out
there should be
things
one.
like that?
If it's not there,
Most of those,
It needs to be there.
I don't know whether it's worth the effort or whether, things like, call the sheriff's department, if we just went and blacked out all those agency phone numbers, just to show that the
Right.
process is there, but all the phone numbers are
Right.
just, that's agency internal information, that way we don't have to hunt and peck through it.
But
Yeah,
that
we
should
can
also be
block
done
that.
with any Public Records Act requests, those should be redacted.
Right.
Um,
All right, so,
I've got a question about the document.
Go ahead.
So the first few pages have appendix names and then nothing. And then we go into a whole bunch of the scanned documents on. So is the new content essentially starting at what, page 173 in this, that sound about right? I see public sewer construction, like, I'm just going all the way through this, I'm wondering if my document is well formed, or if I'm missing things that maybe are in the paper copy.
working on getting down to page 173 to see what you're referring to.
I'm seeing placeholders in Appendix C for budgets.
There are placeholders for information that we did not receive from Sam for this document, and that is also very common. The document's a living document, things like budget information, contact information, they're always changing. So when we do receive the information, or we don't even have to receive it, Sam can put it in when they like. They would insert that information and then update the table at the back that just gives the date of when that.
It looks to me like the appendices got in front of the beginning of the document, so just in the way it was scanned in.
Yeah.
But a little confusing, but I get the sense of it now.
All right, so,
Did you want a motion?
Can I ask about the cost of the preparation of this document?
Yeah, the electronic copies may be out of order.
all right, so, Scott asked the question, what was the cost of this preparation?
So the cost was actually incidental to the work, the general management work, because I was here and working. Normally, this would cost $10,000 to prepare.
Okay.
That's what it ends up being when we put it all together. But there were very few charges related to the SSMP assigned to the district. When I had a junior engineer working on pulling together certain sections, those costs were invoiced, and I can pull those numbers together, but they were very low.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
No,
So do we have a motion or not?
I make a motion that we pass a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside approving the sewer system management plan and authorizing the general manager to monitor and update the plan.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Rick Walczak.
Officially, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. All right, so, no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so it passes. All right, let's go ahead and go on with, we need a roll call?
That needs to be a roll call.
You got it unanimous, so just.
Unanimous, okay. Okay. All
But
right,
if it's unanimous, do we really need the
That's what he
formal
just,
roll
that's
call?
what he just.
as we just said. All right, so going on with new business 5.
What did he just say?
Okay, I guess I didn't hear completely.
Okay, we're gonna go on with the new business 5B, it's okay. Release of wet weather flow management project contract retention in the amount of $5,000 to Stolowski Gonzalez. Discussion and possible action. Could you introduce that, Rob?
Sure.
And then I'll go in.
Last week I met with Jeff Ferrantino from EKI, who is the construction project manager, project manager for Stolowski Gonzalez for the wet weather flow management project. And there have been some issues with the reseeding portion of the contract, which I believe you're all aware of, as far as some discussions whether the topsoil was appropriate, whether, you know, and how much seed actually took, and the coverage of the ground. Once I got into that discussion with them as far as their wish to release the retention, I got to looking at the contract to see whether there was very specific, you know, some sort of a measurable metric for growth. You know, so say you had 100 X type of native seeds per square meter or something like that you can deliver as a performance target for a contract. And I didn't see any in the contract itself, so I went to Kellex Nelson at RCD, and I asked her what, in their history, what do they typically do for that kind of thing? So at least in the future, we would know going forward how we would set something like that up. And generally, it does call things out very specifically. And generally, it's a native plant count that's based over time, up to sometimes 5 years, along with irrigation, you know, irrigation being mandatory to the area and things like that. And so, moving forward, my recommendation would be that we take some of the lessons learned so that this kind of a vague contract language doesn't happen again, so that this doesn't occur to us again, and we can develop that with RCD.
Okay.
And
Just a minute, Leonard, go ahead.
and I guess my only question would be, and perhaps to legal, is I'm not sure that we can keep withholding that $5,000 based on some of those issues. So that would be something we could, go back to discuss. But I believe that, and this is my personal opinion, is that at this point that continuing down this road would, if it led to something like litigation or whatever, could end up getting more expensive than this is.
Okay, let me be the first to speak on this. I'm aware of the patch as I go by it every day, and I see the difference. But how long has it been since the contract was completed? Since the work was completed?
A little over a year.
Over a year. And we've discussed taking action before. We've discussed taking action with other contractors to get things taken care of, and we never did agree to have anything done. So now it's been a year, and I asked that this be brought for the board's consideration. It's been a year. This is I think that we can take action in the future. We can move dirt. We'll be building the Alta Vista tank soon, and we'll have extra dirt from the Alta Vista tank we could bring down. We can put dirt on top of it. We can take action ourselves. I think that we should go ahead. I recommend that we pay this $5,000. It's been a year now, and we've not taken action yet. We had our chances, we didn't, so I think we should pay this now. Okay, so first comment from Leonard Warren.
Well, I disagree, and one of the things that the construction management report completely ignores, and our new general manager didn't mention it either, there's a contract provision that refers to making sure that the reseeding takes via watering. And they did not do any watering. They relied on the rain, which never came. And that's why we have the problem. And what Rob may not know is GSD's alternate director, Sam, is a professional archaeologist. And he went out there and he looked at it and he said, because the growth never took, the fine topsoil particles blew away, leaving only the sand part of the topsoil. So the bottom line for me is the contractor did not perform to the contract specs because they didn't water, relying on the rain that didn't happen. And I talked to Chuck about this afternoon, and basically we can tell the contractor, go fix it.
Any other board members? I think you're right, Leonard. You're correct. But it's $5,000, and we haven't taken action in the last year. We've discussed it. We haven't taken action. Everything you said is true. It's just that we haven't done anything in this last year. So I think that we should go ahead and make the payment.
Well, how do we have any assurances, we being GSD, how do we have any assurances that the problem's gonna be fixed if we release the retention without requiring any action on the contractor's part?
I don't think we're gonna demand that the contractor fix the problem after this.
And I'd like some estimate of how much topsoil you would have available from your new tank construction. What's the square footage of the disturbed area?
I don't know.
Is it like an acre, half an acre?
I'd say it could be up to an acre.
So-
I've been assured that we have at least two dump trunk loads of topsoil
But, you know, if we,
to give without any charge.
but if we have to cover an acre, an inch thick, I think that's a
I
lot
don't
more
think
than
it's
a
an
couple
acre.
dump trucks.
It's not an acre, is it?
Well, so, Leonard, are you saying that out of hand, you're just dismissing this suggestion?
If the contractor wants the money, they have to,
No, Jim's making a suggestion.
well, I
And
can-
it sounds like you're
can-
flatly rejecting any notion of investigating.
right, let me answer your question. I will accept it if you guys can supply, a number for how much, topsoil you expect to have available for transport.
So you're interested in looking into this?
Yeah, if I think it'll solve the
So
problem,
you're
then it's a
interested in
good
looking
solution.
into this? That,
Yeah.
I mean, really, we know we don't have enough information right now to satisfy your never-ending list of demands, but I'd like to see if we can't agree that this is or is not an interesting thing to explore. This is a brand-new idea that Jim has brought, and frankly, I'd rather it not be perceived that you're looking a gift horse in the mouth here when, you know, it's a separate issue from how we deal with Stolowski, but really, I think it's appropriate to not be so dismissive
Yeah.
of this
Oh,
upfront while
I'm
you
not.
wanna beat on Stolowski, okay?
I'm not, as long as the estimated amount of topsoil that you will have available is sufficient, then I think it's a good solution.
Just to help you visualize this, it's a 500,000 gallon tank that's gonna be set down into, I mean, it's gonna be set down well below the topsoil. All that topsoil is gonna have to be removed. Some of it will be put back around the perimeter, but the bulk of it, for a 500,000 gallon tank, is gonna need to be trucked off somewhere.
So what's the footprint of the tank roughly?
I don't know, it's a 500,000 gallon tank. Just imagine it's gonna be a sizable tank,
Yeah, but it could be really tall.
Okay, it's good,
but you don't get all the dirt as topsoil.
okay, and it'll be without
Only-
charge to
only this
GSD or sound. Rob?
Just as a thought, would the board be interested in, or allow me to approach Stolowski and see if we provide the topsoil in exchange for release of retention, they spread and disc it in as some sort of a compromise?
That sounds good to me.
My gut feeling is that we should make this payment, and we could once we put the topsoil in, whatever, we can put our own seeds, or we can have someone seed it. I think it's been a year.
Well, but Rob is suggesting that if Stolowski's willing to spread it, which is gonna be a lot of work,
Okay.
and they've got the equipment, they clearly have the equipment.
Okay, okay, Rob, if you wanna ask them, if
Okay.
they're up to that?
I'll do
Okay.
that.
Okay, Rick Walsh.
I like that suggestion a lot, Rob. I think, I'm uncomfortable, even though, so, if this becomes litigation, it costs $5,000 to say the word litigation. So, at the same time, and in principle, but principle matters, right? So in principle, they didn't deliver, they under-delivered. And so I like the, hey, we have this topsoil opportunity for you guys, and that's good. And if Stolowski came forward and said, we'll spread it and seed it, and then we'll give you your $5,000 and we can walk away. And if you spread it and spread the topsoil and seed it, and it doesn't take, you still get your $5,000. I think that is reasonable, and they're bringing something to the table and they're contributing, because they failed the first time. So.
So,
Rob, excuse me, Rob.
Looking at this moving forward, I'm thinking if we're gonna end up with some kind of a hybrid model similar to that. I talked with Tony about the potential of maybe using some of I think it's a pipe that's installed under the road, so that we could possibly, we might be actually be able to bring water, I think, from the pump station over, by dragging a garden hose through.
Possibly, yeah.
Through that abandoned pipe, so,
Hmm.
we might, but, I think the onus would be on us at that point
Yeah, to water.
to actually go out and routinely water it or set something up along those
Right.
lines
Okay.
to help assure. So it's kind of, what I'm envisioning in my mind is some kind of is a tripartite deal for a lack of the topsoil's brought in, Stolowski agrees to spread and disc it in, and then we're on the hook to actually nurture the seeds and see if we
Okay,
can.
Scott?
a couple of things, just in general about the way the project went, and something that we might want to benefit going forward. They show some pictures in here of using a backhoe to strip the top layer. Looking at the material they took up, it clearly wasn't all topsoil, and they should have been able to see it at the time. It's a critical part of the project, and it's one where I hope in any subsequent project we have direct oversight, staff oversight, and when we see them pulling up clay, we say, stop, don't put that in the topsoil pile, because when we spread it, you're just gonna have clay on top. I think we also anticipate for any project coming forward that when we're gonna put topsoil back down on something, we actually budget for and require watering. We know what it's like around here. You can have 6 months of no rain. Well, but we do have a lot of wind, so, you know, we should learn from this. I'm not clear based on what they show that they didn't go well below the topsoil level and just take whatever the backhoe picked and put it all in the big pile. And I'm not gonna commend them for spreading clay. If the topsoil was actually that heavy in clay, fine, but we don't have any real way to know. I don't think we have grabs of the sample material from the topsoil piles. Since we've had this bone of contention, going forward, I say we pay a little more attention to it at the time, and when we require these kind of performance things, we do things like grab samples from those piles, monitor directly as they scrape it, and monitor directly as they spread it. And then finally, one other thought, we did not have them return everything to roughly the same grade as what they had. So when you look at this, what you see is they spread everything flat. And so now you see this kind of platform in this big swale. And you know, it's kind of unnatural. It's probably altering the flow of water. And part of why it may be staying drier is that it's not getting the runoff that would have normally come down across it, and instead that's spreading around the edges. That's one thing where the topography is something that we should have specified and made sure that they perform to, and I think it's on us that didn't happen. But if we do go in and spread more, we need to think about that. We need to anticipate and correctly design how that should be spread so that we have less pronounced, you know, tableau there where it shouldn't be a tableau.
That's a good point, that actually, if we add the topsoil, it will crown that a little bit, so we probably will have to water that.
Okay.
In
All
recent
right,
years.
okay, Leonard.
One last thing that I want to make sure doesn't get forgotten is, you know, most likely the new topsoil that MWSD will provide is going to have to be disked into, you know, I have no idea, an inch or 2 or 3 depth with what's currently there on top. So, you know, somehow you'll have to find out what depth of disking and your request to the contractor will have to say, you know, very minor disking rather than just spreading, because I think just spreading it is not gonna quite do enough.
All right. Okay, so Rob, you'll contact them and see if they'll agree to that scheme. Okay, so we'll go on. Then managers report, general managers report.
What I did is, in my past experience, I'm more used to calling out kind of just in bullet points some of the activities, and it's kind of a guide to the board. So if there's something that piques your interest, you have a chance to ask me questions about it. So what you look at is probably more of like a laundry list or a summary of just my general meeting activities and things that I consider points of what might be points of interest to the board. One thing we received we issued a notice to proceed, and we have received notice to proceed, and we have received back a signed original to Flow Science to do the pressure surge analysis for the Montero and Princeton Force Mains project. So we're starting to get that issue rolling now. So we look forward to getting some movement on that. Technical Services Supervisor Cohen has been working with the crews to do an air pressure test on the existing pressure tank at Portola, with the, I'd hate to see us have to replace a tank with, to the tune of, might be, I think some of the estimates I've seen was over $100,000. If we can get away with using the existing one. I don't know whether we will have to rehabilitate it and certify it, or whether we can just put it back online, but the goal is to try and find the most economical way to get it, and actually the quickest way to get that back online. if
Can
possible.
you explain a little bit about that? I thought I understood the pump station pretty well, but I guess I'm not familiar with the surge tank.
Well, out back, there's it's a surge tank. Tony, can you explain?
Oh, it's behind the building?
Yeah, it's actually,
It's a long, tall cylinder, much like you see out there at Princeton pump station out in front. Yeah. And it handles like hammer, so if there's a sudden change in pressure, it dampens it, so it doesn't cause problems with the equipment.
Yeah, you haven't walked back there and seen
In 17 years, I've been behind that building once, and that was enough.
it?
What were you doing? Never
I
mind.
thought you'd been in all the nooks and crannies, but now we, one more here.
Let's, okay. Okay, Rob.
let's see. Oh,
Asphalt
some of the
weed
other
patch.
things I like to do is just to highlight some of the kudos for the staff. And one thing that I wanted to highlight with you is that Tim Costello has been recognized by the Water Environment Federation, which is an organization that looks, kind of oversees wastewater operators. And they gave him an award for 25 years of dedicated service, and I wanted to highlight that with you. And I also wanted to point out that we've got several anniversaries this month, and it would be for Tony for 31 years.
Wow.
And Jeanette has been here for 29 as of last month.
Which is impressive, because it means they both started when they were 12.
Thank you.
And for
I guess.
operator for George Long, who's been here for 26 years. also.
Who's that again?
George Long,
Okay.
operator.
26, wow.
So we definitely have a seasoned bunch of individuals to politically
That's great.
direct there. And with that said, the other thing, the anticipated items for the June agenda, which is down at the bottom of my staff report, we're looking at getting a letter for engagement of the auditor for this, to do the audit for this past fiscal year. Their quote for that work, I think they're gonna be in their 5th year of an audit, which still falls within the specifications that we need to, or keeps us within alignment with the timeline that we, anyway, where we're at, we don't have to shop for another auditor yet, but we should probably look into doing that next year, just for that. Their fees are still pretty reasonable. I think they've gone up about $400 over last year, so they're not, it's not excessive. So you'll be seeing that in addition to some of the other updates, where I've got a stack of applications on my desk for our collections worker recruitment also that Tony's gone through, and so we're vetting those out and shortlisting those. So we'll be trying to get that interview scheduled for that position soon also.
Okay. Okay, a little letter.
I would like to say that I really like the format of this manager's report and the types of content that are in it. I think this is great. And the very last comment reminded me that our general manager suggested regarding collection system staffing that, and hopefully he brought this up at the managers meeting, that he thinks that the appropriate staffing level with the new truck that we have on order is to actually just have one crew of 3 people instead of 2 crews of 2.
And what I'd like to point out, at least with this hire, is that we have an OIT who's been, basically subbing in on the collections crew, and he's going to move into the plant and start his actual OIT training. So that would have left this as a crew of 2. So this will actually backfill that to the point of 3.
So you will end up then with what he suggested, which is a single crew of 3.
Who
made that suggestion?
It's,
I would remind you that we discussed it here, and then I would also inform you that, according to our general manager, that was discussed amongst the managers. So this is not news.
And I think I have it on the, hold on a second. Yeah, that was discussed, on this board, and, we discussed it at the last, meeting, it would be, in one of the March meetings, and we discussed it with the new hiree before, the total of 4.
Yeah, and I believe, looking through the minutes, I want to say the March 24th meeting, which I
March
can look
24th.
up, I believe that there was an indication that the board had approved 2 positions.
Right, that's why I'm mentioning it now.
Okay,
but,
so, but does that still stand, I guess is what I'm.
Well, technically it does, but I think that you need to relook at that and see if it makes more sense to go with the alternate suggestion. And he
No,
thinks
no,
it'd be
hang
really
on a minute,
valuable.
Leonard.
That's a big
Hang on a minute. We've talked at some considerable length about how policy comes from the board, and that we look to our managers for lots of, peer review and offering, professional opinions, considered, the kind of informal discussions they can have together. But, for something that has been discussed by the managers, has been discussed here at the board, the notion that, one manager, and I don't care who it is, whether it's my manager or your manager, it just seems really odd to say,
I agree with you.
after the
but-
fact, by the way, let this one person run the board's business. I don't much care for it, and that's what it sounds like, and if that's not what you're talking about, then I'd appreciate a
Let me
clarification.
clarify, I'm just suggesting that our new general manager review that, and if he agrees, then he can bring it back to the board and say, I think we should change direction.
Well, I mean, what I heard him say was that I thought he communicated it fairly clearly, and I don't have issue with it. Certainly, Rob, if you have things that you want to bring to our attention because of your observations, that's always great, but I don't like the notion of taking things that have been properly and duly considered, and then after the fact, throwing sand in the gears.
I
don't
understand, I
like that.
agree with you.
And I don't think it's just, people here have been so super conscious about head count and dollars, just at every single meeting, everybody talks about that. So we got some additional input that possibly another way of looking at this would be to run the big truck with 3 men, which is 2 + 1 to fill in. So that's just a suggestion somebody might want to look at. It's not stopping the process, but that's a lot of money. And if we're that concerned about head count and money, maybe the new general manager could just take a look at it and say, no, this is fine, we'll go with 4 people and 2 trucks, a new truck and an old truck. But it's just a suggestion. It's not a reevaluation, it's not shutting down the budget process or anything, it's just,
Okay.
I didn't have that input when I voted for, this all looks fine, bring on the extra people. So if people are interested in head counts and complain about head counts, this is something we might want to just take a look at.
Well, one thing,
And if
if
it's
I
fine, then we'll forget
might
it.
point out is, there is the opportunity for us to use both the new Vector truck and the flusher truck, and I know that in the past, there's been some issues with the cleaning rotation through here. That would give us the opportunity to maybe go out and do, say, some spot cleaning on what we know are gonna, or could be problem areas before a wet season, independent of that rotational cleaning. So there are some opportunities for efficiency there. There's also some value in having some depth of staffing. If we have a crew of 3 and we need a minimum of that to run the operation, and we go down with one person sick or vacation or something like that, very quickly you can end up dead in the water with your productivity. And I think that, while there are definitely costs to having an additional body there, there's also a lot of benefits that may be hard to quantify, but as far as being able to schedule things like vacations more readily so for the staff moving forward, I think that's important to consider. My perception looking from the outside in at this point is that this organization is staffed very leanly, and to a certain extent I commend that, but the flip side is there's very little room for the normal course of life things like the illnesses or the person that falls down, breaks their leg or something like that, there is not much depth. And so a little bit of comfort cushion there, I don't think is a bad thing.
All right, any other comments? Robert, you through?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, attorney's report. Jim?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I
Rick.
thought you were saying you're through with that.
Okay, did you have a comment on this
Please.
last item?
Yes, I do, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just like to understand that, under item number 7, you're of a meeting with staff and SRT on May 21st. What's the intent of that? On your report, number 7.
Yes. What we're looking at is there are some areas where if we had a failure on the force main, where we would have significant impacts with either traffic or very specific parts that would have to be brought. And the thinking is that if we can identify some of these areas where we know we're going to need some very specific kinds of couplers, things like that, we need to know what those are and have that list, parts list in stock and available, so that when we go out to an area, we're responding to a very specific, I guess what I'm getting at is if you wanted to think of it in terms of if we had a failure during the pumpkin festival where it would take a couple of hours to transit back and forth just a few miles back to the base to get a part if you got it wrong, there's value in sitting down with SRT at some specific areas of concern that have been identified by Tony and developing basically a call-out list, very specifically says you're gonna need these parts if there's a failure at between these stations on the force.
SRT is needed for that?
They developed some of this plan for us, and what we got was a kind of a broad plan, and what I've asked for is more detail in certain areas in response to a product they've already delivered.
Got it, thank you.
So that's where that
And
comes from.
related, the item, meetings in May, item number 1. So, I'm curious about that. Does that mean has that happened, or is that going to happen?
The meeting number 1?
GM Hopkins met with.
Yes,
Tanya.
that's already occurred.
It's already occurred. So, and is that reviewing the plan that we've already developed?
What I've been looking at is, some of this is educational for me, is that there was, several different plans that have been developed over probably the course of 2 years, a 5-year time frame and a 7 that interim director Housen, I think, was integral in developing. And I've been trying to basically collate those two processes and take a look at that as a whole. And so that was more an educational meeting for me more than anything else.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, all right. All right. Jim, attorney's report.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, very briefly, just 2 items. One is one that's on the agenda. There was and this is just an update to the board. We're not involved with the Foley versus CalPERS litigation. We have a release from that. But from time to time, you ask what's happened there. And there has been an administrative judge's decision against Mr. Foley on his claims for the CalPERS PERSable items. The next step is that judicial decision goes to, the administrative judge decision goes to the CalPERS board in mid-June for their approval, disapproval, or revision. And he, if he wants, can file documents ahead of that for consideration. And then after the board acts, he can appeal if he wants. But from us, we're out of it. We're just sort of watching on the sidelines. But I just wanted to bring you guys up to date on what's going on.
Okay.
And the other thing, unless there's a question on that, the other thing is, some of these cases on 218 that I keep reporting about, and I'll just keep updating on these because they're interesting, I think. There was the Morgan versus Imperial Irrigation District case, where the board down there in Imperial had a series of rates, so it wasn't just $4 a gallon per month for everybody. It's a series of rates. And people came in and protested, and the argument was by some of the protestants was that you had to take each class as a protest group. So that if your rates were X and his rates were Y, we had to look at your protest group and then his protest group. And the court says, no.
Does that apply to tiered rates?
Yes. And so the argument was, this is an omnibus, this is a protest for everybody,
everybody get in here and protest in the attic. So that, I mean, that has to be, because if you let this guy protest against his rate, then what do? You have to go back and, I mean, it's a catch-22. So I think the court got that one right. And the other thing was, in that case, I think was interesting, that the board, after hearing the protest and considering the proposed rates, adopted lesser rates. And once again, the challenge was, well, no, you didn't adopt the rates that you proposed in your notice. And the judge says, that's okay. You went out for a notice at this level, and you adopted your rates at a lesser level. That's within the purview of 218. Good decision. See whether that'll be appealed or not. It's the appellate court decision. Question whether it'll go to the California Supreme Court or not. The other case was the case over at Griffith versus Pajaro Valley Water Management Authority. And in that case, the question was whether recycled water and reclaimed stormwater were water charges for purposes of 218. Because if you recall, 218 says if it's a water or sewer charge, you go through noticed hearing, but you don't have to have an election unless you get a majority protest. Any other rates, you have to go through an election. So the question was whether recycled water charges or reclaimed stormwater charges, were they water, as that term was used in Prop 218, and the judge said yes. And so that hopefully is the answer to that, except some of the attorneys would like to see some legislative clarification on that. And I just kind of have to watch that and see what happens. Okay. Hopefully we're okay on that one as well. And that could impact up here where you're talking about recycling and rates for recycling, whether that would be a 218 charge. And that's my proposal.
Thank you. Frank, rules of Leonard.
I have one question, but the very last comment leads me to another question first. Does the initial charge for recycled water, when you first start producing it and set the rate, is that subjected to 18, or is it only increases?
I'll have to go back and look at that.
Okay. My original question was, I can't remember where, but I thought I saw something very recently that looks like they're about to invalidate, or maybe already have invalidated, tiered pricing, where you pay more for higher consumption, which many water districts charge that way.
That case is in court right now. That has not been released yet. It's on appeal. There is a decision saying that was okay, but that's been appealed. We're waiting for that decision.
So can you let us know if the status changes on that?
You will be the first to know.
All right, thank you. So we're going to public comment on your all community, director's reports. Rick Walsh.
I think you're doing a fine job as chair.
Oh, thanks, Fred.
Continue.
Any director's reports?
I'd just like to share with my fellow directors that our new general manager came to the Montero meeting on last Thursday night and was well received. We were awfully glad to have him. I took a moment to thank Jim then, and I want to do so again now for the hard work he put in behind the scenes, just kind of project managing that whole process. And no one saw it but a handful of people, and I got to see a little bit of
what whole process?
The project managing the hiring of the general manager. It doesn't just happen by magic or accident. And I saw Jim put a lot of energy into it, and I was very appreciative. I was also very happy to see that Rob's interaction with our boards was very good, and I saw I looked around the board table and I saw that my fellow board members in Montero got their questions answered and were quite satisfied with your visits. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And I also want to thank Vivian, Tony, Jeanette, and Susie, and Jim, and other staff members, other people who helped with bringing Rob on board. Public comment. Yes, Rick.
One more comment.
I'm sorry.
We had our quarterly meeting of the Special Districts Association earlier this month, and we had a presentation from the Harbor District, which was well received and interesting. I was also finally able to resign my presidency And,
Who took your place?
and it was taken over by Catherine Slater Carter. Our own co-sider is now the president of the local chapters.
I thought she was about like 6 or 7
Several
or 8
years
years
ago.
ago.
She was. There was no opposition because someone actually volunteered.
Okay, thank you, okay. Any other director's reports? If not, public comment.
I would like
This
to
is Susan.
ask you, Chair Harvey,
Yeah.
I'd like to go back for a moment to item 5B. Did the board decide to hold the retention still, or?
Yeah, we're gonna hold it still. Rob is going to talk to them about
About
negotiating
Okay.
a further discussion. But Rob is in communication with them, and we appreciate Rob doing that and handling that for us, so that they don't, so that nothing happens.
By the way, Jim, I should have asked, what time frame do you figure the topsoil will be available from your site?
That'd be late this summer, I think.
You know, late this summer, the fall,
So before
before it
the
rains.
rainy season, if we have
Right.
one.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing, we're gonna be doing construction, we would like to be complete before the rainy season. So far,
It works out.
in our work with SRT, as you experienced with the project in the Burnham Strip, got it underway, got it done, our projects tend to run that way, so I expect we'll be done in plenty of time.
Okay, so we're gonna take a recess, we're gonna come back to closed session, labor negotiations, unrepresented employee, general manager, government code 54957.6, and designated representative, board of directors. We're gonna come back in executive closed session, we did the board of directors and Jim, and everyone else can leave. If you wanna give me the key, I'll lock up.